Eliezer made Aliyah in 1975, spending most of his career in the accounting profession. 8 years ago, following a visit to his physician and concern for his sky-high blood pressure, Eliezer became interested in nutrition. Since then, he has completed multiple courses in nutrition, exercise science, as well as having the Hatzalah to be a medic. He is currently enrolled in a unique school that trains chefs. This is the only school that has a board of physicians lecturing to its students on the impact of nutrition as the most important component in leading a long and healthy life. Once again, let's welcome Eliezer.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me back here, and hopefully that the lecture I'm about to deliver will be as enjoyable to you and also a benefit as I hope it will be. Just a few items. If people who find my lecture of value and interest, there's a sign-up sheet here. I do have a free newsletter that I send out from my website. I have my business cards. Also, I'm possibly interested in setting up classes in Rehovot. So if individuals are interested in classes regarding the impact of nutrition on various medical conditions, I'd be interested in knowing who might be interested in that. And then I will contact those individuals to see if it's possible to set up classes. Also, this lecture is going to be videotaped. It's going to appear on YouTube. So in the next few weeks, it should be up. So individuals who want to hear it again, I'll be sending out a notice from my website as to when the lecture actually goes up on YouTube. Okay, now, I call my website the Fountain of Youth. And people have been looking for the Fountain of Youth for thousands of years, thinking that it's some sort of magical elixir, which is going to cure people of all their diseases, when in reality, all the research shows that the Fountain of Youth is actually in your kitchen. What you eat on a daily basis actually has a greater impact on your longevity and health than anything your physician can do for you, or actually any other possible action that you can take. Although things like exercise are definitely beneficial, but nutrition is actually the number one item that has a long-lasting impact on your health. Now, there are actually several well-known doctors in the States that I follow. Among them is Dr. John McDougall, and his saying is, it's the food. He basically treats his patients with nutrition. If someone comes to him and has diabetes, heart condition, cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure, his first approach is to explain actually in detail what that person should be eating. And frequently, by following his recommendations, and he's not the only physician in this field, although there actually are not that many, but by following his recommendations and recommendations made by other physicians in this field, individuals frequently do not need medication or can get off medication. And so the impact of food is actually more effective than actually most medications for many chronic conditions. Now, we're here today to talk about your immune system. So when it comes to the winter, there are actually several conditions which are very common. First of all, people get colds throughout the year. They get colds, you get bronchitis, and they get the flu. The average child has approximately 6 to 10 colds per year. Most adults have 2 to 4 colds per year. But actually, individuals 65 and over only have about 1 cold a year on average. And that's because there are approximately 200 viruses that cause colds, which is one of the reasons why it's virtually impossible to make some sort of vaccine to prevent colds, because there are simply too many viruses that can cause the same condition. But as you grow older And as you're exposed to these different viruses, your body begins to recognize them, and you develop at least a limited immunity to some of the main viruses causing colds. So as the years go by, if your immune system is functioning properly, when a virus enters your system, your body will recognize it and will be able to defeat the virus before it has any impact on your body. Now, as far as the medical profession is concerned, what major actions can they take? Certainly regarding colds, they don't have any specific medication. Antibiotics are not effective against colds because it's caused by a virus, and antibiotics are only effective against bacteria. So that there's very little, if anything, they can do to you. The next major item is bronchitis. It's very frequent that people get bronchitis. And actually, there's some interesting research on this. The last time I had bronchitis was perhaps 8 years ago, before I made my dietary change, basically. And I went to the doctor, and he gave me an antibiotic. And I thought that was very reasonable. And I got better in a few days, a week, I don't remember exactly how long. And I know many people that get bronchitis, and their doctor gives them an antibiotic, and they seem to get better. So what the doctor is doing, at least at initial glance, seems to be fine. There's only one problem with that. All the research over the last 50 years shows that antibiotics have absolutely no impact on bronchitis. In fact, the Center for Disease Control in the States, and I'm assuming the Ministry of Health here, have actually stated that the amount of antibiotics that should be used when an individual has acute bronchitis is 0. Antibiotics actually should not be used because most cases of acute bronchitis are caused by a virus. And antibiotics have absolutely no impact on that virus. So I would think, since the Center for Disease Control and all research over the last 50 years involving multiple clinical trials show that antibiotics are not effective, that the large majority of physicians wouldn't prescribe antibiotics. And if they did, it must be in a very specific case, and maybe there's some unique reason why the individual is given antibiotics, except the figures show that 70% of individuals who get acute bronchitis are treated with antibiotics. And that means the majority of physicians are actually not paying attention to recommendations which are based on research. So 70%, it could be that younger physicians who recently came out of medical school are probably better at this, and physicians who have been in this field for many decades are following things that they've done for many decades. But still, regardless of how you look at it, the majority of physicians apparently are not listening to what the actual research and what government agencies are recommending. And that's one of the reasons I say individuals need to take control of their health. Just because you go to a physician and he makes a recommendation does not mean that that recommendation is a valid recommendation. He may be making a mistake. It's an honest mistake. It's a sincere mistake, but it is a mistake. And individuals should actually make learning about how your body functions and what makes it healthy part of their lifelong learning experience, because ultimately it pays off. Another problem with physicians recommending antibiotics for conditions which are not meant to be treated by antibiotics, you have an ongoing problem with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And if you want to listen to some of the projections state that in the next 25 to 30 years, most antibiotics will stop working because of the fact that they are so widely used. And therefore, conditions which are currently treated by antibiotics, 25 or 30 years from now, antibiotics may be virtually useless.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
We live in Israel. Most of us have Kupat Cholim. I know that they operate behind the doctor and tell them what to do. Now, you don't have to follow it. But if you go to a doctor, you're getting the Kupat Cholim through the mouth.
Okay, regarding what the Kupat Cholim here in Israel recommends, I think all societies, all medical societies, whether they are in Israel or in the United States, have certain professional recommendations. And physicians who don't follow those recommendations are exposing themselves to potential problems. So that is definitely an issue. Frequently, the recommendations of medical societies have really very little science behind them. But you need to look at this. For instance, there is a medical group in Canada that I listen to. One is a pharmacologist, and one is a family physician. This is the most popular medical broadcast to physicians in Canada. And the pharmacologist, who's been in the field for 25 years, made a statement about recommendations by the Society of Endocrinologists in the United States. And endocrinologists treat diabetes. So there's a explosion of diabetes. So his comment about the recommendations, he says he doesn't know what the basis of the U.S. Endocrinology Society's recommendations are, but what he does know, they have nothing to do with science. So when you look at the disputes taking place among medical professionals, so we're not talking about alternative medical treatments, we're looking at individuals who are both licensed medical practitioners, and they frequently have very significant disputes as to how patients should be treated. Now, if you're a patient, the only way to make a decision, you need to look into this for yourself. And so, I mean, that's what I personally do. And you do not need a PhD or a medical degree. A lot of the information is available. The research is available. There are responsible medical groups that go into the detail and give you information so that you can, if you have a particular medical condition, you can go to your doctor with information and have a professional discussion. In fact, Dr. McDougall, who I mentioned previously, one of his things is, he says that you need to be as knowledgeable about your medical condition as your doctor is. So that when you go to his office to discuss it, he knows that you are up to date. And when he makes a recommendation, then the two of you can discuss it in a logical way. Frequently, physicians make recommendations and simply expect you to follow them. And I think that is actually changing quite a bit. More and more physicians are interested in getting the patient involved and understanding the treatment that he's receiving, and you should be doing that. Okay, the next major item for the winter is the flu. So, for instance, there are recommendations both in the US and in Europe and in Israel. The US and Israel, for instance, recommend that everyone over the age of 6 months be vaccinated. And that includes pregnant women, unless, of course, you have certain allergies, because they make the vaccine in such a way that certain individuals who have egg allergies and other allergies to some of the substances in the flu vaccine have a problem. So this is actually a major push in both the US and Israel to get people vaccinated. And again, on the surface, it looks like a very reasonable recommendation. But the fact is, there is actually quite a bit of research on the impact of the vaccine. And there have been studies, and one of them was done by the University of Minnesota, School of Infectious Diseases. And their statement after doing a study, which was published about 2 years ago, was that the effectiveness of the flu vaccine is vastly overrated. The Cochrane Collaboration, which is a major medical organization in Denmark, and all they do is review medical studies. They have volunteers throughout the world who are researchers, and they review studies to see whether these studies were conducted in accordance with the latest scientific recommendations. The head of the flu vaccine study made the following comment: the flu vaccine is effective in people who do not need it and is not effective in people that do need it. So what does that mean? If a 40-year-old or a 30-year-old who is relatively healthy, no major medical conditions, gets the flu, he should make a complete recovery without any problem. He may be miserable for a week, but it's highly unlikely that they will have any major complications. However, individuals who are over 65 have complications when they get the flu, depending on their personal health status. 80% approximately of all deaths as a result of complications from the flu occur in individuals 65 and over. So the Cochrane Collaboration looked at different groups. They looked at children, they looked at middle-aged adults, and they looked at the elderly. And as far as the elderly were concerned, and I'm not sure you could call 65 elderly because I'm about to be 64. But their comment on that was that there was no evidence that the flu vaccine reduced complications. There was no evidence that the flu vaccine reduced death rates. And the effectiveness of the flu vaccine, and this is pretty much accepted among all researchers, declines as you get older. So the older you are, the more you need it, but the effectiveness goes down. So everything goes in the reverse. Instead of being more effective for elderly individuals, it's less effective. So the people that need it are not getting a great deal of protection, which doesn't mean it's not effective at all, but it has limited benefit. So this is something that you'd have to discuss with your physician. I know doctors who, in general, would not recommend the flu vaccine, but if they had someone who was particularly vulnerable, had other respiratory problems, they may very well recommend it, even though it's of limited use. Yes?
What have you got to lose by taking the vaccine?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What do you have to lose if you take the flu vaccine? In most cases, nothing. Most people don't have any particularly negative reaction. In some cases, it does cause problems. You have a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neurological order. Most vaccines are actually associated with that. It's the number of people actually getting Guillain-Barré. You're essentially partially paralyzed. Most people recover, but in some cases it's a permanent condition. It's a very small number of people get that. Actually, in Europe, there were cases of narcolepsy, which means you basically, during the day, you just fall asleep. So individuals suffering from narcolepsy in this study were significantly higher. There's actually a physician who is the head of autoimmune diseases at the Rabin Medical Center, Dr. Yehuda Schoenfeld. He actually has a video on YouTube. He actually has studied autoimmune conditions. This is a major issue for all vaccines because you are injecting something in your body. It has various substances. These substances frequently are not meant to be in your body per se. The usual way it works is it goes through your intestines and your body decides what should be absorbed or not absorbed. So it blocks many of these things and it causes an autoimmune or various autoimmune conditions. So his research actually shows that an autoimmune reaction might occur 2 months after a vaccine, might occur 2 years, and actually it might occur 5 years. And so all of a sudden you take a flu vaccine and other it's a general problem with all vaccines because of the substances that they create. It can cause an autoimmune reaction. Now he does not say don't take the vaccines. He says the vaccines are actually very useful, and they are, but it's something that you need to take into consideration. So I can only tell you what I personally do. Since I consider my health to be good, I don't take a flu vaccine because I don't see it as being of any benefit to me. Someone else can make a different decision, and that's just fine. But a blanket decision, yes.
When you go take a flu vaccine, as I have done over the years, they make you sit outside for half an hour.
In other words, they make you stay around for a while. They want to make sure that you are not going to have some sort of catastrophic reaction to it, which does occur, even if you don't have any obvious allergy. And again, very, very small number of people have that. But it's something to think about. So for the average healthy individual, the benefit of the flu vaccine is minimal. It's a useful tool for a physician to have. But it's interesting, Yediot Achronot yesterday had some interesting statistics. They listed the number of physicians that take the flu vaccine. So first of all, I looked at by hospital, which hospital had the fewest physicians taking the flu vaccine. I have to admit I was surprised. Hadassah Har Sophim, 11% of the physicians took the flu vaccine. So it's sort of, this surprises me. Ministry of Health is trying to get everyone to take the flu vaccine. The physicians treating people, only 11% took the flu vaccine. It varies all over the place from 11. There are one hospital I think had 70%. Most are in the mid-30s, 35, 40%, depending on which hospital it is. They also listed it for Kupat Cholim Klalit. I believe around 50% took the flu vaccine, nurses and physicians. And in Maccabi, it was like 30%. So you have a situation, and this is actually true in the States also. The majority of physicians are not taking this. So first of all, there's two options. A, they're too busy, they don't want to be bothered, like most people. Or, you know what, they don't see a reason to take it. So on the one hand, you have a government recommendation to do something. People who are experts in the field do not seem to be taking it, at least not all of them. Research organizations are saying it's overrated and there could be some problems, although it's only in a small minority of people. So the flu vaccine is something that is, it's useful to have around. Some people should definitely consider taking it. But as a public health policy, I don't think it's that effective. There isn't any real evidence that it's a very effective tool for promoting public health. Okay, so what I like to talk about now is food. All right, so what I'm going to propose is what you eat is actually not only for chronic diseases, but also for your overall general health, preventing colds, preventing bronchitis, and preventing the flu. So this is my nutrition prescription. This is a recipe that I use on a regular basis, and we're just going to go over this briefly, and then I'm going to go into explaining why the foods listed here have a significant impact on your health. So we have lentils. I happen to like lentils a lot. There's shiitake mushrooms. You can actually substitute any mushroom that you prefer, not only shiitake. I happen to like the taste of shiitake mushrooms. Carrots, scallions, tomatoes, some paprika. You can throw in other spices, zucchini. Bell peppers of all types are very healthy. So I have here, for instance, the nutritional breakdown. It's actually quite low in calories and provides a large spectrum of different nutrients, vitamins, folate, zinc, potassium, magnesium. Now, I'm saying that this is actually 3 portions. I have to admit, I like to eat. I could probably have all of the 3 portions. So the numbers here for the nutrients triple for me. And actually, that's more or less, how it is. I actually eat quite a bit. And actually, this is also a way to stay within a healthy weight. If you're eating healthy food, you should not be more than a few pounds overweight, basically. It's very, very difficult to be overweight if you're eating healthy foods because they're actually low in calories. The reason why most people are overweight is because they're eating processed foods. If you look, for instance, at a muffin, let's say a large muffin that's sold has approximately 500 calories in it. I don't know, I could easily eat 2 muffins. That's like half the caloric intake of an individual per day. Let's say 2,000 calories. Many individuals actually need less than that, depending on your height and your size. I could easily eat two of those. Now, if you eat an apple, for instance, apple might be 80 calories. 2 apples I could eat. That's 160 calories. So in other words, for 2 apples are 160 calories, 2 muffins are 1,000. And you know what? After the 2 apples, you're pretty full. You're not going to eat for a while. After the 2 muffins, I don't know, within half an hour, you'll be hungry again probably. So using food as a means of staying healthy, it's against chronic diseases. It's against acute conditions like we're about to go over. It's against being overweight. It affects your body in multiple ways. Okay, so the first ingredient in this soup is lentils. So we are now going to go over the benefits of legumes. Okay, so in legumes, you have a substance called resistant starch. Now, before I get into that, it's pretty much agreed across the board. 75 to 80% of your immune system is in your intestines. Your intestines contain good and bad bacteria. And if you have a larger amount of good bacteria in your intestines, it essentially prevents harmful microbes from entering your body. You're swallowing things, you are therefore ingesting harmful microbes all the time, and why do you not get sick all the time? I think the common perception is that if you're exposed to a harmful microbe, you'll get sick. If someone has the flu and coughs on you, you'll get sick. But actually, that's not true. Most people actually don't get sick. Someone can have a cold and be breathing on you. The majority of people will not get that cold. Some will, but many won't. And the same thing with the flu. You can be exposed to the flu and not get the flu. And that's because your body is dealing with the particular dangerous microbe. So this is the main focus of your immune system. So you have approximately 3 pounds of bacteria in your body. 90% of all the cells in your body are made up of bacterial cells. So if you keep the healthy bacteria in your body in good shape, they will keep you healthy. So how do you do that? First of all, number one, you don't eat muffins. That's number one. Okay, so why are lentils so important? Everyone is familiar with the fact that people should eat food with fiber. It keeps you regular. It may lower your cholesterol. There's actually, up until about 10 years ago, it was thought that there was soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And now they have a substance which is called resistant starch. So resistant starch is a fiber that you cannot digest, but the bacteria in your stomach use it as food. So the bacteria in your intestines, I should say, digest it, and they use this as their food in order for them to stay healthy. And by doing this, you are maintaining the health of the bacteria in your intestines. And they, in exchange, keep you healthy, because if they are healthy and something of a dangerous nature enters your system, they essentially either destroy it, or the environment is not conducive for a harmful microbe to grow. They also release substances which are anti-inflammatory. It's been shown that individuals who eat legumes on a regular basis have less colon cancer and cancers of all types. So this is actually a very important thing to know. If you look, this is a list by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He's actually one of the other physicians I follow in the States. So he's done a list based on the type of food, which foods have the most resistant starch. So the top 7 or 8 are actually all legumes, lentils, beans of different types, split peas. And as you go down the list, there are fewer and fewer levels of resistant starch. But other foods do have it, so it's not just beans. And another interesting item about legumes, all the studies show populations that live the longest eat the most legumes. So there are 7 or 8 maybe different populations which have been studied because they have very long lifespans. Okinawa, I think Crete, there's several, there are the Seventh-day Adventists in California. There was actually a book called The Blue Zones, which was written about different populations, what they eat, and why do they live so long. And so basically, the most common denominator among all of them are that they eat large amounts of legumes almost every single day. So, and actually, if you look at the United States, it's not a particularly popular food. And you can see, based on the health outcomes, there are consequences for not eating it. And in Israel, it's definitely eaten more frequently. But this is, for instance, if the only thing that you take from this lecture is that you're going to increase your consumption of legumes, I think we did a pretty good job here. I have a friend actually in Tzfat who, someone in his mid-70s, he was about 60 pounds overweight, and he had arthritis. He had serious problems walking, with knees hurt him. He had arthritis, and he had a diagnosis actually by a physician that he had diabetes. So he became very serious about changing his diet. So over the last few years that he's been eating what I call healthy foods. He prepares his own food, he and his wife. They don't buy processed foods. They cook almost everything on their own. He's lost 55 pounds, no more diabetes. And the interesting part, which actually he told me about this, his arthritis is about 90% better. He actually mentioned this when the first thing he did was to start eating more beans. He likes black beans. And after a few months, he said, Ellie, is there any connection between black beans and arthritis? And I said, I don't know. I wasn't sure about that. And actually, so I started looking into it, and there's actually research which shows individuals who eat beans, and particularly black beans, actually have a significant improvement in their arthritic condition. So he basically now, he walks half an hour a day, and he feels great, and that's the way a person should feel. Individuals who make health an important part of their daily life actually should live to be 95 to 100 and be in good health. Now, you're not going to live forever, unfortunately, but the fact is that the body is actually very, very flexible. If you give it the nutrients that it needs, it tends to take care of itself very, very well. Yes?
About soybeans. Can you tell me if they're
Soybeans are included in this. Yeah. Soybeans, there's some controversy about soy, but the controversy actually is not really on the whole bean itself. If you buy soybeans and you cook them and make whatever you want on your own, all the research shows that it's a very healthy food. It's true there's stuff on the internet that soy is not healthy, but there isn't any basis for it. There's no scientific research. The major researchers in this field state without any hesitation whatsoever, whole soy products are healthy. The problem is you have soy burgers and soy this and soy that. You see, they're not using the full bean. There's isolated soy protein that they're putting in these products, and that may very well be a problem. That's why it's very important for individuals to learn how to cook on their own. This is critical, probably the most important health project that the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health could do is teach cooking in schools. This is particularly true of men. Men don't seem to know how to cook anything. There were exceptions, obviously. But a lot of my friends, they don't bother cooking. They buy whatever, assuming that they're not married, they're buying whatever processed food they want to eat, and they don't want to spend any time cooking. And unfortunately, it takes its toll. I have to admit, men and women, as far as health is concerned, they are very different. I have had lectures in Jerusalem. I see 80% of the participants are women. I say, why aren't no men are showing up? I don't understand what's going on here. And I didn't know, I figured maybe I'm talking about subjects they're not interested in. But actually, what I found out, I've heard this from many physicians. If the wife didn't make an appointment for the husbands would never come in. I mean, it's a very common scenario, and I'm not sure exactly why it happens, because it makes sense. You have to be interested in your health, but apparently there's definitely a gender difference. There's no doubt about that. So, and that's why married men live longer than single men. So I'm just letting everyone know that. That's actually a very well-known statistic. But in any event, learning how to cook is very important. So I'm taking a course as a chef. But really my interest is not to be some sort of outstanding chef and fancy foods. I'm really interested in making simple recipes that people can do on a regular basis so that they can maintain their health. I think that is what is important. Most people, look at recipes by chefs, and it's like they like to eat the food, but they're not going to spend the time to make it themselves. And to a certain extent, I'm similar. I'm not interested in spending an hour and a half preparing something fancy, unless it's a special occasion. On a regular basis, I like to have things done fairly quickly, and that's it. They actually also did a study of chefs. It was published in the British Medical Journal about 2 years ago. They looked at television chefs, and they looked at prepared foods sold in supermarkets. And they looked at the nutritional value of the food. And the nutritional value of the food prepared by television chefs was lower than the food you buy in the supermarket, prepared food, which goes to show you, and I think most chefs are like this, they're interested in a presentation, how things look, how things taste, and they do not, unfortunately, have much interest or focus on the nutritional value of the food that they are providing. Give me 1 minute here. So just one more comment about lentils and legumes. So basically, the beans are different colors. Each color actually represents different nutrients. The newest area of research is the fact that vitamins and minerals are actually only a very small portion of what is of nutritional value. In about the last 15 to 20 years, there are substances called phytochemicals, which have been discovered, and there's maybe at this point about 10,000. Maybe 100 or 200 researchers that have determined that the body actually uses. The rest of them, they're not sure if they're used or not. And the phytochemical, these are pigments in the food itself. So you have black beans, and you have red beans, and you have lentils, and you have black lentils, and you have white beans. Each food with a different pigment contains different phytochemicals. The same applies to tomatoes and peppers of different colors. And so it's important to eat foods of different colors because they each contain different phytochemicals, many of which the researchers do not know what impact they have. Some they do. And that's why, for instance, people who take vitamin supplements may actually be missing out on some of the most important nutrients because the manufacturer is putting certain substances into this pill. But he's not putting 10,000 substances into this pill. And therefore, you don't know when a vitamin pill may have 20 vitamins and minerals, and in some cases they do have some of these pigments or phytochemicals, but there are thousands of them, so it's always better that the basis of your nutrition should be eating healthy food. May be necessary to take some supplements, but the food itself that you eat is much more important than the supplements that are sold. Because when you're eating, let's say, broccoli or spinach or carrots, in a carrot, for instance, there's actually 600 nutrients. There are 600 different types of carotenoids, 50 of which I believe researchers have found the body uses. The other 550, they're not sure. The body doesn't seem to have a use for them, but they're not 100% sure of what benefit. So if you don't have 600 of these substances in a vitamin pill, they put in alpha-carotene, beta-carotene, they put in a few, but they are not putting in all 600. So that's why you're getting much more when you eat food versus when you are taking a supplement. Okay, now moving on to,
Could I ask you a question?
yes.
Why is sweet potato 9 when you've left out a very important number? Percent fiber is
Yeah, I see that. I don't know. This is Dr. Furman's list. Sweet potatoes are actually very healthy. I mean, they're actually in Okinawa, which they have the longest life.
But I'm saying,
There's no number there.
no. You think there's an error in that?
No, okay. The last column is his scoring of the nutrient density. He has a formula where he rates food based on the number of nutrients it has. B1, B2, B3, etc., different phytochemicals. So basically he's saying, for instance, the highest there is lentils. So sweet potato at 9 is actually pretty high. It's actually fairly high. He actually gives a weight to these phytochemicals in food, which most individuals or most dietitians, let's say, are not taking into account per se. For instance, the sweet potato, 60% of the diet of Okinawans, eating a traditional Okinawan diet, is composed of sweet potatoes. You know, that's changing because they have McDonald's there. So the younger generation is not eating the standard Okinawan diet, but the Okinawan diet. And that also means if you're eating a healthy food, you don't necessarily need to eat 50 different foods every day. If you have several, 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 healthy foods you eat on a regular basis, you actually are doing very well. Yes?
Okay, just a quick question, okay? So what's the shelf life on all these beans?
Well, it's actually very long. Shelf life could easily 6 months you can store beans for, and probably a year. They do deteriorate somewhat, but
longer to cook.
right, they become harder. So at minimum of 6 months, there's absolutely no problem, keeping beans basically. Yes.
While you're talking, can you put the soup recipe back on so I can copy it?
Oh.
Okay. And I also want to ask you about the colors of the foods in the lentils. You've spoken about red lentils.
There's black lentils, there's red lentils, there's green lentils. All of them are healthy. I personally like red lentils. They taste somewhat different. They cook quicker. And I think they're somewhat sweeter, at least for me. That's my personal taste. I don't soak, as far as soaking beans is concerned, I don't soak beans. Some people do. It cooks quicker, but it's not necessary, to soak beans. Okay, so basically just covering some other issues. Yes?
Doesn't soaking reduce the amount of gas?
Yes, it does. So people may want to do that. What happens basically is that after you've eaten beans for a while, it's not an issue. Your body this is actually true because the body gets used to it and the bacteria the good bacteria in your intestines increase, and therefore it doesn't become an issue. Individuals have problems with that because they don't eat beans on a regular basis, and they're very high in this fiber, and you can't digest it, and therefore there's a problem. So people do soak beans, and if you find that you want to soak the beans, that's fine. But it is, eventually it's not necessary. Okay, a few other items. We're going to talk about vitamin D. As far as using vitamin D, most people are vitamin D deficient. That's pretty well established. It's actually a hormone versus a vitamin. It's used in, I think, perhaps 2,000 different chemical processes in your body. And it's meant for you to absorb from the sun. Your body produces vitamin D. Most people don't walk around in bathing suits all the time, and therefore they're not exposed to the sun, and they tend to have a deficiency in vitamin D. Also, when you get older, your body produces less vitamin D. The standard, and this is somewhat in dispute, but the researchers who actually do research on an ongoing basis in vitamin D recommend that your level be 30 or more. I think that's what's recommended in Israel. In order to get to 30, you actually need a blood test. That's the only way to determine it, because different people are producing different amounts of vitamin D, and someone may take a supplement with, let's say, 1,000 international units, and his blood level will be 20, and someone else taking 1,000, his blood level will be 35. So to say that you need a specific amount of vitamin D on a daily basis, it's a bit misleading, because it depends on how your body functions. Most people who want to reach a level of 30 need to take approximately 2,000 international units a day. So the research on vitamin D is as follows. Many of the studies show that individuals who supplement with vitamin D and get to the 30+ level have anywhere from 30 to 50% fewer respiratory conditions. There's actually was an interesting study in Japan on school children. I believe the children were 6 to 12 years old. They had about 1,200 children who they split into two groups. One took 1,200 units of vitamin D. One did not supplement. And the vitamin D group had 58% fewer cases of the flu. Now, that is actually what would happen if you took the flu vaccine and it worked, because the flu vaccine it's never 100% effective. During a good year, it's about 55 to 60%. Again, if you're younger, it may be more. If you're older, it may be less than 30% effective. This year, actually, the Center for Disease Control in the States has already said the vaccine is not a good match. What that means, we'll find out only after the flu season is over, but I think most of the professionals in this field are talking about 40% effective, maybe less, which means if you're older, maybe it'll only be 20%. It might be less than that. So we're talking about supplementing with vitamin D. Actually, we're close to what taking a flu vaccine would result in, which doesn't mean you can't do both. And by the way, another interesting fact, individuals who eat a lot of vegetables and they're older and take a flu vaccine, and then they've drawn blood from these individuals to see whether you create antibodies, individuals who eat a lot of vegetables and are older and have a flu vaccine create much more antibodies in their blood. So actually eating properly increases the effectiveness of the flu vaccine. Yes?
On vitamin D, there's research that a lot of vitamin D comes from China.
Coming from what?
And it's not effective, there's no FDA supervision of vitamin D. So what you should really do is find out where your vitamin D is coming from. The pill caps, in the pill form.
Well, first of all, whenever you buy a supplement, you need to buy from a reputable company. There are many supplements. Actually, China supplies a lot of raw materials. I think 80% of the vitamin C on the market comes from China. So does that mean it's bad? Not necessarily. But obviously there's issues with China, which has, low quality control. But there are companies in China which I'm sure, do have high quality control. So the most important thing is to buy from a reputable company, and that company actually frequently does an independent lab analysis. There's actually I'm a subscriber to a company called Consumer Labs. ConsumerLabs.com. They review supplements and they test them and they publish the results. You have to become a member to actually get the results. And it's true that they have tested multivitamins, and they say, well, the bottle says there's, let's say in vitamin D, 1,000 international units, and sometimes they find 2,000, sometimes they find 500, sometimes they find 900. I mean, there is a certain amount of variation, which is, I think, about 10% variability, because it's very difficult to get everything exactly the same. But a good quality product will have 10% or less variability. And they've also found supplements with contaminants in it, with lead in it, with mercury, so that these are issues which are definitely are of concern. And if you want, you should go to that website, ConsumerLabs.com, and some of the material is available to the public. If you join, it's actually a small fee. It's like $20 a year, something like that. There isn't a major fee there. But this would be for someone who actually is interested in seeing which are the best supplements that are rated the highest, and they have a rating service, for the different manufacturers. But a good manufacturer will have on their website or available to the public a third-party lab analysis of their product showing that what they claim is in the product is in there. If the company doesn't have that, then you shouldn't buy from them. Like I personally supplement with a few, not many supplements, but a few. I do take a vitamin D supplement. I take like 2,500 international units a day. I take B12. B12 is also important. Individuals over the age of 50 actually tend to have low B12 levels. I eat no meat. I do eat fish sometimes, but there was a study on Tufts University. Individuals who were 60 and over, even those who ate meat on a regular basis, about 40% of them had low or deficient levels of vitamin B12. So it just makes sense. And this is actually fairly well accepted among physicians, that if you're over the age of 50, it makes sense to supplement with B12. Low levels of B12 are associated with higher levels of dementia and higher levels of Alzheimer's. So it makes sense to supplement, and it's actually a very inexpensive thing to do. So it simply makes a great deal of sense to do it.
What about salt and sugar intake? It makes sense.
Sugar, regarding salt and sugar, sugar actually has been shown to suppress the immune system. So if you take sugar, I believe for the next 2 or 3 hours, your immune system is depressed, basically. And if you're eating sweet things with a lot of sugar the whole day, we're talking about your immune system being permanently depressed, and that's, which obviously makes you more vulnerable to any infections. Salt's another story. Most people don't realize this. About 80% of your salt intake comes from processed foods. If you don't eat processed foods, I don't eat processed foods. I'm not going to say I never eat processed food. I might, if I'm going to a wedding or a bar mitzvah, yes, I might have something there. But on a regular basis, I'm cooking all my own food. I put salt on my food, but I do know My salt intake is very low compared to what other individuals. It might be 60 to 70% less than the average individual, simply because I don't eat processed foods.
But can it be detrimental?
Low salt or high salt is it could be detrimental from a cardiovascular point of view. From as far as your immune system, I'm not aware that it has any specific impact on it. But from a cardiovascular perspective, there's issues with high blood pressure. There's issues with actually stomach cancer. Japan is, for instance, they have a very long lifespan there. They also have very high rates of stomach cancer, which is one of the few countries in the world where they screen for stomach cancer. There may be also in South Korea, I think they screen for stomach cancer. Because, for instance, South Korea and Japan, a lot of salty foods. They also have high levels of hemorrhagic stroke. Most strokes are a result of a blood clot. Hemorrhagic stroke is when your artery bursts open and you have a stroke. Apparently also high intakes of salt increase risks for a hemorrhagic stroke. But it doesn't, I'm not aware that it has any specific impact on your immune system. So there's reasons to reduce salt intake outside of the immune system. Yes?
How about salt, like Himalayan salt?
Regarding sea salt and Himalayan salt, I've looked at it. There's very little difference. It's true that if you look at let's say the breakdown of what's in the salt, there's more minerals in Himalayan salt. But we're talking about an infinitesimal amount. It's very, very little. So it has many more minerals, microscopic amounts. I don't think there's any benefit whatsoever. It's not of any significance. Given your total daily intake of, let's say, magnesium, and so regular salt, let's say, may have, 2 milligrams. I'm not sure that's accurate. Himalayan salt will have 3 milligrams. You need like 400 milligrams of magnesium. So it has very little significance from what I can tell. Yes?
How do you know to estimate the salt intake?
Okay. There are food tables. There's actually the U.S., this is probably the best database. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has an analysis of 10,000 foods. There's actually free software on the internet where you can look up a food and you can see exactly what its salt content is. But again, in general, processed foods have very high levels of salt, both for preservative reasons, but also for taste reasons, because manufacturers know salt tastes good, and therefore you eat more. That's their goal. And it's certainly not an illegal goal. Their goal is to get you to eat their food. So they're doing something which is actually damaging to you. I don't think they're not doing it deliberately. They want their sales to go up. So, but if the fewer processed foods that you eat, your salt intake drops significantly. It's as simple as that. Actually, bread is actually one of the foods which contributes a lot to salt intake. And people who eat a lot of bread, I'm probably not aware that with that they're getting quite a bit of salt.
Okay.
And
What about sweeteners like sucralose?
At best, you could say it's neutral. It has no impact. There's actually some studies on individuals who drink diet soda. And people who drink diet soda weigh more than people who don't drink diet soda. And the reason that is, at least this is what the initial interpretation is, that you're drinking something and it's sweet. Your body thinks it's sugar. As a result of that, your pancreas is pumping out insulin so that the sugar can be digested properly and put in the blood. When the substance arrives, there's nothing there. There's nothing to digest. Your body doesn't understand what's going on. When you produce insulin, you get hungry, and you eat more. So in other words, you're sort of tricking your body into thinking that there's something there, but there isn't, and the body says, I need something, I'm expecting some food here. What you gave me is not food, and then you then subconsciously eat something else that you wouldn't normally eat. So actually you end up eating more calories. So having non-caloric sweeteners, you can use some, but people who use a lot of it, yeah, they tend to weigh more. There isn't that much evidence that it actually reduces your weight.
On the same topic of the artificial sweeteners, you can just keep it to like 2 or 3 little pills a day, and instead of sugar, which is better, the sugar or the sweetener in that case?
You know what? Some of these, I think stevia, in general, is thought to be the best sweetener because it's a natural sweetener. The other sweeteners are chemicals of different types, and there's issues. Does it have other impacts on your body? These disputes have been going on for decades and probably will continue. You should avoid them. There's another substance. There's sugar alcohols, which also cause problems with bloating. But there's one sugar alcohol, I actually have to look up the name, which actually has half the calories of sugar, and it is actually considered to be a good sugar, basically. It doesn't, for instance, cause cavities. It has antioxidants. I have to look up the name of what that is, but that's another option. But stevia or one of these sugar alcohols are options. But the other artificial sweeteners, they're made of various chemicals. The consequence of which, you know what, really it's difficult to tell, because if you're going to take something for 20 years, from a research perspective, I don't even know if they could, figure out what it does to you. It's very difficult to control what people eat, and they take something and then they don't take, and that's why the research in nutrition is very difficult. Because you can't say, okay, for the next 5 years, you are going to eat 1 portion of broccoli every single day. It doesn't happen. There's a professor, and one of the courses I went to, he said if he were asked to participate in a nutrition research project, he probably would refuse. Because he said, I'm not going to eat, let's say salmon every single day for the next 3 years. I'll probably get sick of it after a month or 2. I'm going to switch to something else. And that's why interpreting these studies is actually pretty difficult. You really need someone who's an expert, and there are, but it's difficult because people change, what they do, and they don't follow instructions, and they lose interest in this, and you're stuck with a study and trying to figure out what the results mean. Yes?
There's a U.S. organization called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. I had a subscription to their newsletter when I lived in America, but that was a few years ago. They may have something online now. But it's an organization of physicians and dietitians and health people who publish articles that deal with advocating nutrition over traditional medicine kind of things. And they come out with studies, it's medical studies that they publicize that show things sort of before the traditional medical community accepts it. So they were looking at things like pickling causing stomach cancer among Asians, but the high rates of eating tofu had benefits for women going through menopause that didn't need to take Premarin, and comparing those studies. So it's called PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, if anyone's...
Right, I'm familiar with the organization, and Dr. Neil Bernard is the head of the organization, And I've heard many of his lectures. He has published research on cardiovascular disease and diabetes. He's written books. So so the head of the organization is actually very well known. And no, they do a lot of research in this field. That's true. So their whole idea is to basically educate people on what to eat. Now, they advocate no meat, no milk, no eggs, no fish. Is there research supporting that? There certainly is a great deal of research supporting keeping non-plant foods, meaning meat, fish, eggs, and milk, to a minimum. I think that is actually very, very well established. The more meat, for instance, you eat, it's pretty clear you have higher cardiovascular diseases and overweight issues. And when you're eating plants, which is pretty much my diet, except I do eat some fish. You know what? On the holidays, I might eat meat, but I don't eat it on a regular basis. When Dr. Furman, for instance, has a bit of a more flexible approach, he recommends that you keep the amount of non-plant foods or animal foods to 10% or less of your diet, which is not a lot. We're talking about a few ounces a day. But the research actually shows that that is what is actually very effective, certainly in preventing chronic illnesses. So now, for instance, Dr. John McDougall also, he's not part of PCRM, but he accepts what they say. His approach is actually that the best thing is to eliminate it, because once you start eating it, people go overboard. So, you know what? There's something to be said about that. So, in any event, the most effective foods for your health, there's absolutely no question: beans and broccoli and sweet potatoes and corn and barley. These are the foods that have composed the majority of individuals' diets in healthy societies. This is what, historically, when you go back thousands of years, this is what they ate. I actually did a podcast. What did Jews eat in the times of the Second Temple? There is actually research on this. So, and the fact is that contrary to what people think, unless you were part of the wealthy class in Jerusalem, you might have meat on holidays. That's pretty much it. They had things like sheep and goat milk. Cow's milk was very rare. There were no huge herds here of cattle to feed meat, so that could be slaughtered for the people to eat. It was primarily a vegetarian type diet. He ate a lot of actually legumes, particularly lentils, chickpeas, grains, barley, things like that, wheat, oats. Yeah, that was the rice. Actually, rice was introduced to Israel through Persia. So they actually had a fairly healthy diet, not at all compared to the type of diet that was eaten today.
Well, what was their life expectancy?
Oh, see, that's interesting, because that is what physicians claim. What was the life expectancy in ancient times? So the fact is like this. If you look at there are statistical tables that are published. And if you look at the Roman times, they will say average life expectancy was 30, maybe. So you can say, obviously the diet wasn't doing very much because they didn't live very long. That is actually a distortion. Average means everyone who's born, how long do they live, and then you divide by the number of people in the population. What happened in ancient times, there was a catastrophically high infant mortality rate. By age 5, 25, 30, maybe even 50% of kids died. If you lived into your teens, you actually got past this point. So if you lived in a stable society where food was available, there was clean water, and there were societies like that, and you had reached, let's say, the age of 20, your life expectancy was not that much less than it is today. People lived to be 70, 80. Hippocrates lived in his 90s, and Plato, and in the Gemara it talks about Rabbi Akiva, and they lived long lives. But that was like individuals who lived in stable societies, had at least some access to basic medical care, which is actually probably more advanced than most people think, even though there were no antibiotics. But the problem was that many children died when they were young. Up until 100 years ago, infant mortality was very, very high. That's why, for instance, more people are now living into older ages, because the children who died hundreds of years ago are able to live longer due to modern medicine, basically. But as far as actually extending your life, somewhat, the modern medicine, what happens nowadays is you have very advanced techniques. So you are sick, and 100 years ago you would have died. So you survive whatever you had, but you're disabled. So there's actually a concept of health expectancy. There's life expectancy and there's health expectancy. So life expectancy, let's say you live to be 90. But how many of those years are you going to live in good health? And actually, life expectancy is increasing. Health expectancy is actually decreasing in many cases. So there's a longer period of time when people are alive, but they're ill. So is that a good thing? It's a problem.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
So when I listen to a lecture like yours, it's really for me to go and do research and become knowledgeable because of the internet. Now, the question is, have you heard of the macrobiotic diet?
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah. Isn't that the best way to go? Despite what you said here today, if you did the macrobiotic diet with a professional, you would probably benefit enormously. And by the way, one part of that is to prepare everything yourself, which nobody does. But if you want to live a healthy, long life, particularly if your family is genetically susceptible to certain conditions, like heart condition or cancer condition, if you take a macrobiotic diet, you will help yourself avoid the genetic thing from coming up too soon. So what I'm saying is, in your whole lecture, you didn't talk about how people eat beef, goat meat, chicken. Now, supposing I asked you, okay, I want to do the best thing, which meat should I eat? You didn't address that issue. Fish, too. Throw fish into that. There are many issues that people have to make compromises, and they will make a compromise. They will choose one because it's a protein thing, which you didn't mention at all either. But the order of doing things is very important.
Okay, regarding protein, people have actually, in general, the amount of protein that people need can be achieved very easily. And there is a concept where people think they need to eat meat for protein, and that is false. It has been proven false. But it's a concept which probably will last another 25 or 30 years, or maybe more, because that is an old concept. So if I have potatoes, you are getting protein in those potatoes. People don't think carrots have protein. Broccoli has protein. Almost every single food has protein in it. You do not need meat for protein. Regarding fish, I eat salmon and sardines. Why? Because they're high in omega-3, and they also have some vitamin D. And they taste good. Not everyone, certainly sardines, not everyone likes. But regarding a macrobiotic diet, I don't think it's the best diet. It's better than average. The fact is that eating a lot of vegetables is actually better than a macrobiotic diet, because a macrobiotic diet concentrates on grains, which are okay, which there's nothing wrong with grains, but if you have vegetables, they actually have much higher levels of nutrients in vegetables. So I don't think that a macrobiotic diet is that healthy. It is above average. I know people on a macrobiotic diet. Some of them do very well. And they do include some vegetables in a macrobiotic diet.
What is this diet?
Macrobiotic diet was started in the 60s, I believe. There was a Japanese individual who, it's both a philosophy and a way of eating. And his concept was that rice, for instance, is the highest food, both spiritually and for health reasons, and that people should concentrate on rice and similar foods, other grains. That is a large part of the diet. Some people do well on it, some people don't. But it can be a healthy diet, but I don't think it's the healthiest diet. I think we're about to end, so I'm going to stick around a little bit. So if someone has questions, you can ask me afterward.
Sorry, one quick question. How do you feel about dairy products, milk and dairy products, in terms of your...
In general, regarding dairy products, the majority of the world is lactose intolerant. The majority of the world is unable to digest milk because you have lactose in milk. And about 70% of the people worldwide cannot digest milk when they get older. So first of all, most people do not eat dairy because they can't. It causes digestive issues. Milk can be consumed. I don't consider it to be particularly healthy. I guess just one last comment about milk. There's actually some interesting studies. The countries that consume the most milk have the highest levels of osteoporosis. In Japan and other countries where they consume half the calcium that is recommended in the U.S., they have much lower levels of osteoporosis. There are actually quite a few studies on that. So people can consume dairy. I personally don't, but if someone wants to, but it is not a particularly health-promoting.
Milk products have to be for children up to a certain age, for their teeth, for their bones.
That is actually once a baby starts eating solid food, they do not need any more milk. The children can be very healthy, bone development, no milk whatsoever.
I'd like to thank Eliezer for being here today. He'll be around here for a few more minutes for anyone who has any questions. We'd like to thank you on behalf of team, our appreciation and our certificate. And just to remind everyone that next Monday is another lecture. It's Eyal Lifshitz, Wonder of the Desert Camel Milk, Research in Medicinal Properties. He may have some comments to make on that. Please feel free to talk to him. He has a sign-up sheet here. I've been getting his emails for at least a year now. They're very informative and it's been very interesting. Thank you for coming today.